Before you start the next step, you're going to take your flat brim and bend it into the shape that you want for your design. Now remember to make sure that you have the center front and back, and you can just gently bend that wire to be the shape that you want. It could be bent one way, it could go up on one side, down on the other. Using a running stitch, go around the head size opening, securing the top cover to the brim. Make sure you're stitching on the inside of the wire on each side. Continue this all the way around the opening. So, going from the front to the back, you're going to gently smooth the fabric out. Now it should be on the grain, so you're going to smooth it towards the bias tape, towards the edge of the wire. Don't pull it. You're just going to want to pull it, just smooth it out towards the edge, and pin through your fashion fabric and the bias tape at that point. Go to the other end, do the same thing. Now we're going to work slowly around to the side. If you can find exactly where the side is, go ahead and pin that. Now I'm not pinning all the way through the seam allowance as well. I'm just catching the fabric at the edge here. So working from back over. Now you want to be careful of pulling this too much on the bias as you go. You don't want to stretch it. Got all my pins on the wrong side. You don't want to stretch your fabric too much on this curve. Now you can see it's kind of got a little buckle there. Some people will glue this because you're doing a concave curve. It's not necessary on this small hat. On a very large hat, you definitely would want to glue this with some rubber cement to this brim. If you have some rubber cement, you're welcome to do that. You just glue it down. Make sure you don't put too much. Make sure that it stays tacky. If you have some spray adhesive, you can do that. And spray the brim, then lay your fabric down. You want to make sure that it doesn't come through your fabric, though, when you do that. So just work your way around. Start from the back and work towards the side again. You want to just be careful not to pull it so that it gets wrinkles in it. Okay, so go all the way around your hat. At this point, you'll need to make a design decision about the edge of your hat, how you want to finish it off. The first choice will be the bound edge. The bound edge is using a piece of fashioned fabric or bias tape around the edge, which gives it a nice finished edge. The other one will be the plain edge, which is creating a false seam at the edge of your hat. It's a more conservative look. Technique 1, bound edge. On this side, where we're going to do the bound edge, I'm going to stay stitch. So basically just stab stitch all the way around the brim, right behind the wire. You want to do it through the bias tape on the side, right behind the wire. This is really just to hold it in place, but as you go, you want to make sure that you're smoothing your fabric. So you can feel the wire. So for a bound edge, after you have stitched the fabric through using a prick stitch or a running stitch right behind the wire, then you're going to trim this seam allowance off right at the wire. Now remember, I'm only doing half of my hat, so if you were going to use this technique, you'd go all the way around. So I'm going to trim this seam allowance. Trimming it right at the wire, like that. Okay. Technique 2, the plain edge. For the plain option, what I'm going to do is catch stitch this seam allowance over onto the back side of the binding. Now you may need to trim your seam allowance a little bit so that it lines up with the edge of the binding. So I'm just going to, it's just like a cross stitch, like a hemming stitch. I'm going to catch a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Catching a little bit of the fashion fabric. I'm catching the binding. And just repeat that all the way around. So now I've completed the top side of my hat. One side I've catch stitched to the bias tape on the other underside. This will become my plain edge. And on this side I've done the technique where I'm going to bind this edge. So I've stitched it and then trimmed it right up against the wire.